Good evening everybody and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round 10 of the Pro Series, where we are at Indianapolis tonight for 60 minutes of exciting action. Last time out we were at Silverstone, whereas Marco Bischoff took a very dominant win at the opening round. Really managed to make that Porsche work and extended a big advantage over Korekis and George Boothby that completed the podium. They had their own scrap of their own and it was Korekis that came out on top. But Indianapolis for this evening gives us a very interesting build-up and opportunity to see what is going to happen with our championship protagonists. We've heard it every week, constantly. It's been a battle between Bischoff and Jardier, with Bischoff continuing to extend his lead in the last couple of races. It was disaster last time out for Jardier, got caught up in instant that he was not to blame for, just unfortunate, blindsided through Abbey, and ends up suffering a big penalty in damage as a result. So we'll have to see how they fare this evening. But Indianapolis, a BOP that could put in some other contenders that we haven't quite seen before in some of the races, because looking at some of the dailies that we've had here on LFM over the last few days, the Ferrari has looked exceptionally fast. It was exceptionally fast before the last BOP changes, and it still seems to very much be there. And the likes of George Boothby, Valentine Barrier, Samir Fock, we've got some other drivers in the Ferrari as well this evening, are all very, very rapid. They could be in very strong contentions to not just lock out the win, but maybe lock out those top few spots. And where will that leave the likes of our championship leader Marco Bischoff in the Porsche, the BMW M4 of Jardier? We'll have to see how they end up managing to tackle that one. But we've got 13 corners of chaos here at Indianapolis. Such a different challenge, obviously an adaptation of the main oval circuit. And then on the road course, so you head down in towards turn 1 and you're immediately into turn 2. Very tricky in the opening laps to get through there cleanly. Wrap it around through 3 and then into 4. Carry that momentum through 5 onto this sort of short little straight section. And then a very awkward corner 6. It's longer than you think. You have to be very patient. And then set yourself up for the exit of 7. Nice back straight for some more overtaking opportunities on the run down towards turn 8. Hard on the brakes there, and then a fiddly section through 9, 10 and 11, and then as you wrap your way round through into this final chicane to bring yourself towards what is a bit of an unorthodox pit entry, and then through 13 and 14, the banked corner at the end of this circuit. We don't go through the entire banking here in the layout that we have on ACC, but still a bit of an unusual one to try to tackle. And it's an interesting mix with this circuit, because there is a lot of tight and twisty corners where you really want all the downforce, all the grip in the world that your car can supply. But with such a limited sort of couple of main overtaking opportunities, you really want to maximize those straights as best as you possibly can, and the slipstream around here is nothing to be snuffed at. I saw a bit of spying on George Boothby's stream earlier, as being hunted down by the man currently number 1 in the LFM licensing system, Trevor Wenham, and even sort of from around 7/10 of a second away, that he was able to pick up a slipstream and allow him to sort of keep Boothby in his sights. So it'd be really interesting to see how all of these drivers deal with this type of circuit, who sets themselves up for overtaking opportunities, who sets themselves up to deal with the infield, the tyre management, all of those aspects, and how will the BOP changes and our drivers, some of the best on the platform, deal with all of those things together. We have some fantastic entrants for this evening that will undoubtedly give us action, as we have very lovingly got used to over the last few weeks of the Pro Series. So the server will be coming on very, very shortly, and we will see how they fare this evening. Be 60 minutes around here, as mentioned already, and the weather is going to be interesting. There's not the greatest chances of rain, but we've got some fairly high chances of changeable conditions, and knowing what the ACC weather system is like, you don't always need to give it too much of an opportunity before it then starts to maybe factor in a little bit of rain. And will we have a bit of a topsy-turvy session like we did at Watkins Glen, where the rain came in about halfway through the session and could put complete pay to anyone improving on their lap times in qualifying, and gave us a very interesting grid order going into that race. So obviously Indianapolis, another one of the recent additions in the GT America pack. Will we see similarities in that once again? I have to see, and if that rain does come, how do these drivers try to tackle that challenge, not just in terms of strategy, if it hits maybe halfway through the race, but setting up their car, you have to quite often commit in one of three directions. Do you aim for a perfect car in the dry? Do you aim for a perfect one in the wet? Or do you go for something that's always a little bit of a compromise, always maybe dancing a bit more than you would like in the dry and in the wet, but just about deals with both of those conditions as best as you can get away with? So a lot of different factors then that we'll have to see these drivers tackling. But of course, we're in the Pro Series, we have some of the best drivers on the platform, and they will give us a show, no doubt, and show us exactly how it's done. A little bit of a recap on the championship standings. Marco Bischoff then, your championship leader, is far in the lead after that bad luck for Jardier, but still time for him to make up the gap. Marco Bischoff then leading on 5,111 points, with Jardier in second place, 3,979. Samir Fock finds himself in the P3 spot, a recent addition for Yassi as well, so congratulations to him on that. On 2,911 points there for Samir. Eric Del Fanta hasn't had the most extremely sort of up there at the top pointy end of results, but has been consistent between the rounds that he's attended and has found himself in a nice P4 position. Karppinen, P5, being very, very quick on occasion, but just hasn't always been able to put it together in the way that he would have wanted. George Boothby, only having participated in 6 rounds, finds himself in 6th place in the standing. One of our 2-time winners for this season. Will he be able to make it a 3rd this evening? In the Ferrari around here, maybe he will be the first to do it. We're looking very, very racy. Darren King, P7. Not sure if we have Darking this evening. And then Valentine Barrier, P8 in the standings. Only joined us for the last few rounds. Has participated in 4 rounds overall, but shown incredibly mighty pace at times. He started from the very back of the grid at Watkins Glen, but he was the fastest man on circuit. And especially when those tricky changeable conditions came in, he was the one to find that pace in the Ferrari, get into a groove that even the likes of George Boothby, that really did run away with that race. Valentine was able to find some extremely strong pace. So if he can put himself into a strong qualifying position for today, we'll have to see what he can do in that Ferrari. As I think the server has just appeared, so we shall make our way into that and get into the action very, very shortly once we switch over to qualifying. But how then will these drivers deal with this? Yes, we've got about 6 seconds in to qualifying, and we shall see how we get on and how these drivers get on this evening. We've got a good mix of cars as well, which is nice to see. I think the new BOP has brought about a nice bit of variance. We've got Porsches, BMWs, McLarens, Ferraris, Audis, and I think we've also even got a Lexus, would you believe, in the entry list. So that'll be fantastic to see. It's been a while since I've seen a Lexus in a top split race, so we'll have to see how Dominic, if he does join us tonight, can get on with that car. And we've also got a Mercedes, couple of Lamborghinis as well, good to see on the grid. So we've got a good variation in terms of our main entry list. So hopefully all of those guys will join, and I will be particularly interested if that Lexus does join. That could be a new one. I know we had some fan favourites in the chat for the Bentley, but yeah, the Lexus, I have to say, it's one of those cars that really does make a rather extraordinary noise. So I shall just switch us over to qualifying now. there we go then. So all of the cars piling their way out of the pit lane then, as they set about for 15 minutes of qualifying here at Indianapolis. See how they all get on and try to tackle this one. As it appears I'm having a slight issue with one of the overlays, excuse me. I do apologise for this, I'm not quite sure why I've got the additional HUD that's appearing on the screen. I shall try to get that sorted sooner rather than later. Carpenter will be the first of our drivers to head out on circuit and see what he can do. I do apologise because juggling all of this unfortunately on a single monitor, so that when something does go wrong it of course ends up going twice as wrong as it ordinarily would be. Let's see how that goes. I think we may have finally got there. Fantastic. Right. After all of that then, we have seen our first drivers heading out onto the circuit. Carpenter then to lead them around for the first laps as they all get their eyes in for the very, very first time, making their way down towards turn 8 there. I think that's Marco Yonkers just behind in the Porsche poleman at Zandvoort, but made use of the conditions there that we had to see that one come through, but I have to see if he's got the pace in the Porsche today to make that one work. I think there's still something a little bit wonky, I'm afraid, with HUD, because I don't have any weather information, but I am concerned about trying any other changes all too soon in case we end up with something else going a bit on the wonky side, so we'll have to see how things go as we make our way through. Carpenter then rounding out the final corner through turn 14 then onto the banking, and then down towards the start-finish line. I'll see what is the effort going to be from the number 10 car. It is immediately beaten by Marco Yonkers that goes up into the top of the time sheets as George Boothby lays down the pace actually and goes ahead of everybody else. So looking mighty, mighty fast at the moment are these drivers. So I have to see what the pace is for each of these guys. Everybody immediately on improvements then on this lap, as you would expect, as they start to get their tyres warmed up and into the window that they want them in. But this man right now, the number 9 car, the pink Ferrari, and two-time winner this season then, already 0.4 of a second clear of anyone else. And he was in the interview box the last time out and said that he was aiming for a win, and right now that is exactly what he's looking to do. But certainly too early to count out the likes of Marco Bischoff, who we know can put together some absolutely mighty and special laps. Will he be able to knock off George Boothby from that top spot right now? Boothby finding a couple of tenths. We'll see him go into the 33s if he can make it all the way with that margin to the line. Marco Bischoff only finding quarter second at the moment, so we'll see him jump up towards the front row potentially, but George Boothby found even more time in that penultimate corner, so the pink Ferrari making his way to the line one more time. George Boothby, what's it going to be? He takes the tightest line he can, and it is a 33, a 33.842 for the two-time winner in the Pro Series. Samir goes into P2 for a short amount of time as Jacob Osterman in the McLaren, a name that we haven't seen all too often in the Pro Series. Very, very competitive lap there in that car, so really good stuff from the number 6. We've also got Walsingham up there in the McLaren, so right now it's the mid-engined aero-dominant cars that are finding pace. As it stands, Del Fanta puts himself into P5. Good effort there from him. We've got in 6th place has just slotted in Schwartz in the Ferrari, and our championship leaders, or championship leader and protagonists, are falling down the orders dramatically at the moment as a lot of these mid-engine cars move their way up. One of them being Valentine Barris. Said he might be quite fast. That's the Lexus just in front of Dominic that's gone off at turn 1. But Valentine 34.0, so not quite in the 33s with George Boothby, but looking very, very racy in that Ferrari. We wondered maybe what he could do. Put himself in a far more competitive position, but look at Osterman, 0.2 of a second up in the opening 2 sectors of the lap. It won't quite be good enough to challenge for that pole time at the moment from George Boothby. We're coming through 13 now, trying to see how much speed he can carry towards the line. Look like a pretty tidy exit. He's maintained that advantage and he's further gaining. It's going to be almost 0.3 as he hits the line. Is it going to be good enough to snatch away P2 from Valentine in the Ferrari? It's going to be close, but not quite. 0.005 of a second between them. Osterman, he will carry on, but purple in that final sector, so McLaren may be looking quite competitive there, but Valentine, he hasn't said goodbye to that pole position yet. Can the Frenchman? Oh, that was a bit deep on the entry towards turn 12. A number 8 car is going to have a bit of a tough time trying to recover that, and he's lost all of that advantage, and I don't think it's going to be an improvement, but he did have 0.2 of a second in that lap, and that is more or less the difference between himself right now and pole position. So Valentine will have some more opportunities. Will he be able to snatch anything away? We've got Lewis Roters in the McLaren, excuse me, on a slight improvement. A lot of drivers not on any sort of improvement at the moment, except Hugo Merles is on a big improvement further down the order. He's currently 17th as he hits the line. It's going to be good enough for P5 for the time being, so very good effort there from him. Also, importantly, in terms of our championship, Jardier has managed to make his way up into P7, and Marco Bischoff only finds himself in P11 for the time being, but he has found a 10th and a half on this current lap, so will he be able to make enough of the improvement to jump ahead of his championship rival? We'll have to wait and see. Does look like, though, he's going to be struggling to try to challenge for the win today on raw pace alone. The Porsche very, very quick at a lot of circuits, but maybe Indianapolis not quite one where, despite the BOP changes mostly going in favour of the Porsche, that Indy then maybe just not one that has gone so well for the German outfit. The Marco Bischoff then rounding the final corner. He's got about 1/4 of a second, excuse me, actually going into turn 12. Hard on the breakthrough there. This will be the part of the lap where I imagine the Porsche should be quite strong. Good changes of direction, nice on the brakes, but then losing it on the exit relative to his previous best, so it's only going to be a couple of tenths. It will see him compete, I think, with Jardier's lap time. It might slot him just behind, always a bit more than that, and he goes into P9 for the time being. I think one of the lowest potential starting positions that we've seen from Marco all season long. So right now, it's still George Boothby with just over 5 minutes to go that has pole position by 0.2 of a second over Valentine and Osterman, but we saw Valentine did have a couple of tenths in that car. So whether or not he can improve and see himself jump up the order, bit of an improvement for the Mercedes of Morgan McCall at the moment. The South African seeing it to the line and be good enough to go up to 22nd place, as I think also Appel is on quite an improvement at the moment. Saw the Delta flying up for a second, but I have a feeling maybe just went too deep into one of the corners, so you get that brief increase in lap time gains. but somebody that maybe is maintaining it further through the lap. Correcas finished P2 last time out. The McLarens do seem to have some pretty handy pace here today at Indianapolis, so can Grantus do anything on this lap? He's almost found 0.3 of a second, continuing to gain nice exits out of turn 11. And some of our front runners looking like they're maybe going into the pits for the final time, but Correcas almost half a second up on his previous time. That would be very competitive towards the sort of top 6 area. He loses it a little bit on the exit, but I think it might be good enough for P6 to slot himself just in front of Sam here. So Correcas, what can he do? Taking the tight line then towards the line. And as he hits the line, oh, it's good enough for P4. So the delta then a little bit of a lie, 0.003 of a second clear of Rotas as he hit the line. And Correcas then gets himself just behind the lead McLaren of Osterman. Brilliant stuff there from him. Another driver on a big improvement is Marco Jonkers, making his way through into that final complex. See what he can do in the Porsche. Pole sitter when we went to Watkins Glen, the last GT America track. Doesn't have the weather quite in his favour today, by the looks of it, at least from what we can gather. I do apologise for the weather info not appearing. I'm not quite sure what has happened on that front. But Jonkers then, I think he's backed out of that lap, but it did look like he had a couple of tenths, and someone else that has a couple of tenths in the Porsche. Oh, that's a big cut along the apex there, going into the final sector. Not ideal for what our championship leader would have wanted. He's still roughly on the same delta that he was before that moment, but you can see just how upset that car got. I think he's got Walsingham just behind him on track as well. That is who is on a big improvement, and it's a bigger improvement than what Bischoff has got in his Porsche for the time being. Marco then finding a good exit out of turn 13, takes the short line towards the line. And it's going to be, I think, good enough to challenge for top 5 area. Oh, not quite in the end. Bischoff P7. Walsingham actually loses a bit in the final sector, slots in just behind in P8. And now Jardier has found himself being a couple of positions in front of Bischoff to now being on the outskirts of the top 10. Has he got anything left in the tank to try to recuperate those positions? We've got Merles currently P6. He is on an improvement at the moment, although he has lost it a little bit through that couple of corners. George Boothby, I think, has just initiated a lap as well. He's gaining time, so is Valentine. Del Fanta on a good improvement, almost a quarter of a second up, approaching that complex of 9 and 10 and 11. So tricky if you get offline through here. It's a little bit like the S's at Cota. You get offline for one apex and it is just a domino effect after that, from one to the next. I think Del Fanta is suffering a little bit from that and has lost some time. Keep an eye on Osterman as well. He's found almost a 10th in the opening part of the lap, so he is trying to see if he's got anything left in that McLaren to find and see if he can snatch away that pole position, or at least a front row spot away from the Ferrari ahead of him. And Del Fanta running it towards the line. No gains for him in the end, but Osterman 10th and a half up. It's been a little bit up and down through this lap. 60 seconds left on the clock. Very, very late on the brakes there for Osterman. You can see that delta shot up. And I think he has maintained that advantage. And that's looking a little bit dicey potentially for George Boothby, who right now is not an improvement. He might have enough time, depending on where he is on the circuit, for one last effort. But Osterman right now and Valentine all on improvements behind him. And it's looking very, very close in terms of whether or not they can snatch away a potential pole position from George Boothby. Osterman, though, a poor run out of the penultimate corner. And I don't think that is going to be good enough then for Poles. Barely going to be an improvement. So the McLaren driver has got time in the lap, but he hasn't been able to put it all together in the end. But he does actually take just enough off his previous best to snatch a front row spot away from Valentine. But Valentine's on a big time. And he makes it into the 33s. The second man there goes on a 33.9 and just about manages to get himself back into P2. But that is all she wrote then for Valentine. No further efforts from him. George Boothby slightly down on his previous best, but he is not finding any time. Jardier in the pits as well, as are a few of our other drivers inside the top 10, so I don't think there'll be any further improvements from them. We've got a little bit of time up on the Ferrari number 32 car of Schwartz then, as Samir also finding a little bit of time in that Ferrari on the outskirts of the top 10, and does just about manage to take it away from his new Yassi teammate, and drops Jardier then down to 10th place. Not what the man in the M4 would have been wanting. Schwartz has not found any more time in this lap. It looks like that may be it for him, although I have to say Korekis does seem to still be on a lap, and he almost found a 10th in that sequence of corners. I'm not sure though if he's lost it on the line through 9, 10 and 11. It's going to be very, very close for Grantis if he wants to try to move his way up. He needs over a 10th if he wants to gain any positions. He was only 0.03 of a second clear of Rotors with his previous lap time. I don't think Korekis has got anything left in the tank unless it's a mighty exit towards the line. And as it turns out, it wasn't a lap, and that then is the end of the session for that one then. So good stuff from all of our drivers, as they will get set up on the grid in just a moment. We shall walk through our grid, but what a session then for George Boothby to take pole position here at Indianapolis. Do just want to make sure that those results and graphics have made their way through, and I do believe that they have. So let's have a look then at our grid for today then. George Boothby takes pole position and puts himself very nicely for trying to challenge for the win in this race. Can he make it 3 wins this season? Valentine Barrier starts in P2. Jacob Osterman, good lap from him in the McLaren to get into 3rd place spot. P4 goes to Korekis, another one of the McLarens. Finished 2nd last time out and is at the pointy end of the grid once again. Another McLaren. Lewis Roters sitting in P5 with Hugo Merlez in the number 16 Ferrari. Seeing what the Frenchman can do in that car. And our championship leader, Marco Bischoff, down in P7, further down than we would conventionally see him, and I think may have started further down at Watkins Glen, but that was obviously abnormal weather. Walsingham starts in P8 with Samir Fock jumping up to P9 at the dire moments of that qualifying session then, and snatching P9 away from this man. Jardier starting 10th in this race. What can he do in the BMW? A car that doesn't seem to be very competitive here. Maybe just that front engine position not being agile enough to deal with the tricky chicanes and twisty sections. Del Fanta in P11, and then Schwartz lines up in P12 in the Ferrari. And then it's Luke Addison, part of the GTWR team, starts in P13 with Timu Karppinen in the number 10 car, P14. Another one of the BMWs. Marco Yonkers, poleman from Watkins Glen, not able to repeat his GT America pack streak, and starts in P15. Joris Appel, the first of our Audis. It's been a while since we've seen maybe an Audi that far down the order with recent BOP changes, but good effort from him. Mellis starts in P17 with Fideli in the 22 BMW. Goes to P18, and then it's Henrik Gamble in the number 12 Porsche starting in P19, and then rounding out the top 20 is Sasha Vassner in the number 18 car. He'll be joined by Maximilian Schwanker in the number 21 car that starts in P21, and then Rafael Borgesman, the Brazilian, in the number 19, very bright pink McLaren there. And then the Mercedes of Morgan McCall, the first of our Mercedes, and I think actually possibly our only 1. Starting in 23rd position, then we've got Oscar Tringali in the number 28 Ferrari then. And then just behind Arnaud Brun, starting in 25th position. Albin Manson, the Swede, starting in 26th. And then Jonas Baumann in 27th place in the number 24 McLaren. Jonathan Clifford, the first of our Lamborghinis, I think joining him just behind is our other Lamborghini of Tristan Bullwinkle in the 29 car, starting P29. Then we have Nico Perninen in the BMW. We have a connection here. And then the Lexus, which I have to say I will be personally cheering on, ever so slightly, driven by Dominic Kogler in the 23 car. And then Dennis Saliver, excuse me, in the 32nd position. And then rounding out our grid is then Igor in 23rd place then, as we make our way back to normal coverage. Let's see then, George Boothby will be your pole man to try to lead this field the way. Can he make it 3 wins in this championship? Or will the likes of Valentine, who was so quick and arguably the fastest man on circuit, we were wondering what he could do if he started further up the order. Will he be able to challenge George Boothby potentially for the race win here? We'll have to see. He'll certainly give it a good try, there's no doubt about that. But will the Frenchman have enough in that car? George Boothby has been in fantastic form recently, but can he make it 3 race wins? We'll have to wait and see. Won't be long until we find out just how much pace that pink Ferrari has in the tank. But the Ferrari is clearly looking very quick, and I'm surprised actually by the pace of the McLarens as well. That is extremely strong stuff from each of them. Not what I was anticipating coming into this. I knew the Ferraris were going to be quick, and I suppose obviously a lot of similarities in terms of the aero performance and the placement of the engine in those cars between the Ferraris and the McLarens, but definitely seems to be a mid-engine dominated circuit. It's a shame that we don't have any Hondas in the field to see what they could have done, but everybody now get themselves lined up in formation and hopefully making our way through what will be a clean lap 1. It can get a little bit tricky going down into turn 1 for the first time. Very tight corner and hard braking zone, so we'll have to see how it all ends up playing out. So we'll switch over to the helicam, trying to make sure we capture as much of this start as possible. It looks like it's going to be pretty dry, hopefully, in terms of what weather information I do have. That we'll see whether or not we get any surprises on that front, but it will be George Boothby then to lead this grid away for 60 minutes of round 10 here at Indianapolis. Can he make it a 3rd win in this championship? And there away is a good start, very even start between our race leaders. There's Osterman also pulling across just behind, trying to cover off Korekas. Can Boothby outbrake Valentine in towards the very first corner? It's a long run down towards turn 1. Valentine trying to fight it around the outside, and he's keeping it very honest, but George Boothby squeezes him on the exit. Osterman now trying to go around the outside of barrier on the exit. Boothby away, then Korekas now getting involved in this one as Ferrari already swarmed by the McLaren. Osterman trying to send up the inside, and Korekas is going to take them both on the exit, I think, potentially. It's a big run there for Korekas, who's now side by side with Osterman. Osterman will have the inside going into the next corner. Boothby away out of front. Marco Bischoff getting caught up in stuff in the background as well. Valentine trying to fight this one back, but I'm not sure he's got anything that he can do through his next series of corners, and Korekas makes his way in towards P3. Further down, Marco Bischoff losing positions to Karppinen and Samir Fogg. Now I believe Jardier's got in front of him as well, so poor start for our championship leader. Jardier, huge start actually, up into P7 already as it all gets very chaotic on the apex of that corner. Jardier trying to go side by side with Samir, holds him off for the time being, and Marco Bischoff losing position potentially to Karppinen as they head through towards turn 12 now. Can the BMW out-drag the Porsche? I'm not sure Marco Bischoff is going to have anything to fight with here. Oh, is it getting very, very tight? It breaks to Carpenter, goes very, very wide. And Del Fanta's going to take the pair of them potentially through in towards turn 13. Can the Audi capitalise on the advantage? Carpenter shuts the door, and the Audi only gets ahead of the Porsche. The Porsche, can Marco Bischoff do anything about that Audi ahead of him? Not the start, though, that Bischoff would have wanted. He's lost positions, and now he's under pressure from McLaren just behind off. Walsingham is trying to go down the inside. Further action down the field. Del Fanta also having a look on the inside towards Carpenter. As Walsingham sticks nose up the inside, Marco Bischoff trying to go around the outside, and Del Fanta's going to turn into the inside of turn 2. And the championship leader, can he make it stick? And I think he has. Brilliant stuff. Walsingham now trying to capitalise on this one as well, seeing if he can do anything around the Audi just in front. But I don't think he can for the time being. Opportunistic stuff from Marco Bischoff, trying to recover those positions. Changes of position between Brun and Tringali further down the order, as we try to find a camera angle that will show us something, as still going side by side. A lot of cars going side by side. Someone's going wide there. I think that was Perninen on the exit of that corner. But the Ferrari has managed to get past. And Marco Bischoff has made his way past Carpenter now. So championship leader not hanging about, lost positions on the early parts of the lap, but already moving up the order, as I think someone's gone off further down the order. Marco Yonkers getting very, very busy around him at the moment, as we've almost got 3 wide going through into turn 11. Now under pressure now from the Ferrari of Schwartz just behind, who tries to stick a nose up the inside. He's running out of room, and Yonkers squeezes the door and just about manages to keep it pointing in the right direction. The Ferrari sends it down the inside, but he's got too late on the brakes, and now Yonkers trying to come back around the outside of him. He's got Tringali and Brun for company, who are side by side earlier on in the lap, and they're going at it all over again through the exit of 14 there. I think Tringali's going to have the better line, and he will get a bit of a slipstream up ahead of what is going on between our race leaders, or front group at least. Barrier trying to go around the outside of Korekis. He might make that one work. Merles trying to get involved in this one as well, trying to make it a Ferrari 3 and 4, but can't do anything on the exit. Valentine then making up then for that poor start at the beginning. George Boothby did everything he wanted to get out of that, has checked out the front, already opening up a gap of 2 seconds. Yonkers still fighting Schwartz further down the order, but the Ferrari unable to get past for the time being. But we've got a little bit of a train building up with this group from 4th position down, as we've got Korekis, Merles, Roters, Jardier and Samir all in this train. Marco Bischoff a little bit further away from this than he would have wanted. All got very busy in the opening part of the lap, and definitely did not play in his favour. Jardier, though, good start for him early on, as meanwhile Schwartz and Yonkers going side by side again, and Tringali trying to go around the outside now as Yonkers goes very, very wide on the exit. I think Oscar's going to get through there, and he does, and he might even have Brun to worry about through. It got very tight with the Ferrari here before. Oh, as it goes again. Mirror image of the previous lap there. The Ferrari up the inside. Can Henry Gamble do anything? As that's one of the Ferraris in the background had a huge moment, just about keeps it pointing in the right direction. Yonkers off in towards turn 12, and now as Gamble trying to go around the outside in towards turn 13, gives him the squeeze on the exit. We've got Penninen getting involved in this as well in the BMW, now trying to go around the outside of the Porsche, and he might have the grunt, but he's got another Porsche straight in front of him, as Yonkers going to give the toe to the McLaren, the McLaren, the Porsche just behind. The BMW of Fideli is getting involved in this one as well. Pernin trying to go all the way around the outside, as that's Gamble now sending it down the inside of turn 1. It's almost 3 wide. Yonkers made contact with Pernin, and Fideli off as well. Oh, unfortunate stuff there for Pernin, an instant victim. 3 wide doesn't always go, and it gets very, very busy into that part of the lap. Unfortunately, Mellis losing out the position to Dennis in the Porsche just in front, as the Lexus has made its way up towards 26th position, which is perhaps more courageous and valiant than it seems. So good stuff there from him, but unfortunate there for Pernin, and not what he would have wanted. Caracas has dropped a little bit away from Valentine, but still keeping him honest, as Jardier putting more pressure onto Roters, who isn't too far away from Hugo either, and Samit keeping Jardier very, very honest. Have to see what sort of lap times Bischoff is doing. It looks like he's pulled away from Carpenter just behind, and is closing in on this gap. So our championship leader is making up for that poor start. George Boothby at the front of the field, 4/10 clear of Osterman, 6/10, excuse me. So George Boothby absolutely flying at the front. This is what he did at Watkins Glen. Clearly has something for the GT America circuits because he is absolutely loving them. Jardier closing up to the back of Rotors. The BMW does seem to have some good straight line speed. We saw Pernanen sweep all the way around the outside of that group and then unfortunately got collected in the contact afterwards. Further down, it's all getting very, very busy with this group again. Henry Gamble right on the back of Yonkers. And they've got Fideli for company as well. Another group not too far away from that is this train behind Igor Krusnich in the BMW. And then we've got the Lamborghini of Clifford. Now it's coming under pressure from Schwanker in the McLaren. 21 car trying to see if he can find something around the outside going in towards turn 6, but unable to do so for the time being, as meanwhile Walsingham I think has just maybe gained a position onto Joris Appel. So what happened there between those two, went down the inside going in towards turn 8 and made it stick. So making use of that McLaren pace that it seems to have around here, and it gains that position. Meanwhile, it's all getting very, very busy between Merles and Rotors, as Rotors trying to go down the inside. Jardier trying to get involved in this one as well, and Rotors I think is through. Jardier trying to go all the way around the outside of Hugo Merles as they head on towards the back straight. He might even get a bit of a tow from the McLaren just in front. Marco closing in on this battle as well. Samir very much present in all of this, and Jardier has managed to get in front before they get down towards turn 1. Samir trying to go down the inside of Hugo as well. We may lose 3 positions in just a couple of corners. Samir, can he make it stick? He runs number 16 very, very wide on the exit, but fights it, and Hugo stays in front. A little bit of contact there between those two, but Marco Bischoff now in a prime position to try to capitalise on some of this, but crucial positions for this championship. Marco all over the back of Samir, as he gets a little bit of a kick of oversteer there, going through the kink of 5. But just about keeps it all pointing in the right direction. But Jardier then does seem to have some fairly good pace in the BMW, stronger than perhaps we would have imagined. Now Samir though trying to hunt down Hugo down towards turn 8. Can he do anything under brakes? It sends out towards the inside, and Hugo does give him room. He respects it, but doesn't give the number 4 car anything to work with, and Marco Bischoff trying to find something, an opportunity, anything that he can find here, as I think we've just lost Schwanker from the server. I'm not sure what happened there, but unfortunate for him. Didn't quite catch how that happened, sadly. But Marco Bischoff continuing to put pressure onto these guys. Clearly a car that is not working as well as it has done in previous races, but is looking feisty in the hands of Marco Bischoff. Would we expect anything else? Oh, it's just getting very busy again! Oh, between Yonkers and Fideli, and they make contact on the exit of 12, and now Fideli under pressure from the Porsche behind. That's Dennis trying to hold off Yonkers. These drivers have been coming together on a few occasions now. Yonkers has got Kogler in the Lexus of all cars, trying to make a move now down towards turn 1. Does the Lexus have enough horsepower to outdrag the Porsche? I think he has, and he's now trying to go around the outside. Dennis down in towards turn 1. Can the Lexus outmaneuver the Porsche? That's a tough ask. Number 23 gives it a good go, but he makes his way through up into 25th position. Meanwhile, we've got Walsingham and Joris Appel. Who's that going very, very slowly? That's Borgersman that was getting put under pressure from the Audi of Vassner, who now has got Luke Addison for company, trying to go around the outside. That may turn back towards the inside. He gets an amazing drive on the exit down towards the run towards turn 8. Then can Addison do anything about the Audi trying to cut it across the nose before they get to the braking zone? Can't quite make it stick, and Vassner is fighting back, but I think it's going to be too little too late. The BMW does find a way through, and he makes his way up into 15th position, as Vassner got the company of McCall for the time being, as well as Mercedes trying to find a way through. Looks to the outside, cuts back towards the inside. Can the Mercedes get a nose up before turn 11, excuse me, goes too deep on the entry and ends up having to give that position back to Vassner. Good reactive driving there from Vassner to see and spot that one. Meanwhile, it's getting very, very busy for the battle for P2. Valentine has been closing up to the back of Osterman. He's been bringing Korekas with him and now finds their way in a three-way fight out the front. Meanwhile, George Boothby all the way up the road. So go on board the rear splitter. I'm not even, you can see a speck. Those cars that you can just see moving, maybe if you've got a nice 1080p screen in front of you. But George Boothby absolutely checked out away from this field. It was a very, very poor lap last time around from Osterman, but right now Korekas is the one putting some pressure onto Valentine. That was a nice exit from the Ferrari. I do just want to check in on Borgesman and Appel further down. It got very, very tight between those two, I think, for a moment. Don't think the McLaren could do anything about the Audi in front unless it's a big send towards turn 8. And the answer will be no for the time being, with this trio fighting it out for P2. Valentine got a good run there on Osterman. Can he do anything towards the inside of turn 12? Oh, that's a little bit deep for Osterman. That might compromise his exit through 13. Oh, it's a very late dive from Valentine. Oh, how opportunistic. And he's side by side with Osterman on the exit. There's contact between the pair of them. And Korekas might now capitalise on that, see if he can get past the Ferrari. Valentine fighting back now, trying to go down the inside towards turn 1. Mellis brings out yellow flag further down the order, but we have to keep an eye on this battle. Osterman back in front of Valentine. Valentine staying in the slipstream, trying to find a way past. Does he go inside? Does he go outside? Outside it is. Korekas trying to see if he can get involved in this one. Barrier late on the brakes. Can he sweep around the outside? He's going to be showing the exit of turn 1, and Osterman holds on to the position, but what an opportunistic dive there from Valentine, trying to see if he could do it into 13. Completely caught Osterman napping there, but unable to do so for the time being. Fantastic stuff though between those two. It did get a little bit argy-bargy, but they just about managed to get through there okay. Meanwhile, it's slowly but surely bringing in Rotors and Jardier into this battle as well, because these guys are lapping slowly as Osterman once again under pressure from Valentine, heading down towards turn 8. Enough of a margin though, and enough pace in a straight line to out-drag that Ferrari. Can Valentine do anything through this sector? He gets very, very close to try to send down the inside towards turn 11, and he does! The Ferrari makes contact with the McLaren again, Osterman off, and Korekas follows the Ferrari through and now tries to see if he can get 2 in 1. Korekas had to have patience last week when he was trying to battle with George Boothby, and maybe he's doing the same again. Now down the inside of the Ferrari, and Korekas, he takes 2 in 2 corners. Brilliant stuff, and Valentine now trying to fight his way back through. Osterman won't be happy about how that all played out. And look at this, we've now all of a sudden got this huge strain of cars all battling for P2. Korekas though capitalises on all the chaos and makes his way through into second place. The Valentine now under a little bit of pressure potentially from Osterman behind. Osterman won't be keen on how that one played out. He's got Rotors for company, and Jardier has got some company as well, I think, of Merles. This train all gets very, very busy. Oh, as Korekas has gone off at the first corner, and he's allowed Valentine back through. Osterman now trying to go around him as well. And oh, it's contact between Jardier and Rotors. Jardier off, Rotors swings back across the road. Jardier just about keeps it together. Now he's made contact with Hugo Merles. Oh, it's getting very, very chaotic. Marco Bischoff involved in this one as well. It's all 4 wide going through turn 5 now. Jardier trying to see if he can find his way back. And there's further contact between Carpenter and Del Fanta, and Marco Bischoff gains about 4 positions in a few corners. Valentine's back up towards P2, Osterman P3, Korekas P4. Walsingham now trying to see if he can make his way past Del Fanta, trying to go around the outside onto the back straight. What on earth happened there in those few corners? It was getting so busy, and it all ends up getting a bit too busy. We've also got Appel coming under pressure just behind Walsingham, going down the inside. Oh, he's gone way too deep in towards turn 8 there, as he ends up turning into one of the most expensive lawnmowers on the planet, and that's going to allow Del Fanta and Rotors back through. Rotors had to regather that, as did Karppinen in all of that chaos. Karppinen now trying to make his way through on the inside of Borgesman in the pink McLaren. So he just about gets a nose in front. Luke Addison getting involved in this one as well, trying to see if he can go around the outside. Karppinen down the inside of McLaren once again, all up over the curb as it gets very busy. Oh, and it's Borgesman around, and now that's from Mercedes who gets sent around as well. Oh, it's all just going from bad to worse. We had so many clean laps to start with. Samir all the way down the order as well. I think maybe he was the Ferrari that got involved in that contact early on, potentially with Jardier. They were around the same sort of place on track. It was so difficult to tell. and all of a sudden it gets very, very busy indeed once more. Oh, and these cars all looking significantly more beaten up than they were earlier on. Carpenter finds his way up into P13. Walsingham now 0.4 of a second away from Appel, just in front. And my goodness, in just a few laps, as the chaos has taken place as Mellis and Yonkers going down in towards turn 1. Yonkers trying to fight it. Oh, he's made a little bit of contact with the Ferrari there through turn 2, and Mellis is not happy about that one, as they went side by side through turn 1 and 2 there, and the Ferrari came out not favourably as Borgesman, I think, tried to make a move around the outside of Gamble just in front and ended up losing out and had to drop back as Walsingham all over the back of Appel just in front. Our lead Audi, not our second Audi, got Delfanta up in towards P8. But Walsingham then trying to see if he can make that McLaren work and get anything done. It all started off at the front with Korekis, who made his way through after the initial chaos between Valentine and Osterman, but then went deep, it seems, down towards turn 1, and then that just brought that train that developed so quickly into about a 6-car train. In all of that, George Boothby now has a 12-second lead. We're less than 20 minutes into this race, and George Boothby is having an absolute Sunday drive at the moment up there at the front. He must be loving life, as he's not involved in any of this chaos. Schwartz has come into the pits as, who is that was very close with one of our other drivers? That is McCall and Borgesman going side by side down in towards turn 1. Can the Mercedes have enough grunt, big BOP changes for that car in terms of power? Borgesman trying to fight it on the outside, but I don't think it's got anything to respond with. And the Mercedes does end up taking the position up into P18 then. Let's have a little bit of a recap as to where everyone finds themselves. So Osterman and Valentine swap around. Korekis now, after having got into P2 for a short amount of time, has now dropped down into P4 again where he was before. Bischoff somehow, someway made his way through all of that and now finds his way in P5. Jardier had some contact there, I think, with Samir or Hugo potentially. They were both blacked out Ferraris, unfortunately, so it's difficult to tell. He finds himself P6, and after being a few cars in front of his championship rival, now is a position behind, so that's not good for the man that's currently in 6th place. Hugo Merles P7. Delfanta finds his way up. I think he benefited in all of that. He is now P8. Rotors, big loser in that. There was contact with him and somebody that dropped him down the order. See, very, very beaten up on the side of that car. Appel up in towards P10. Walsingham on his gearbox then. And then we've got the likes of Vatanov, I think, gained through that. Karpinen was involved in some contact there as well. He's dropped down the order. But my goodness, that all shifted in terms of people moving around so quickly. Meanwhile, as Walsingham continuing to put pressure onto the Audi ahead, things about move up towards turn 1, but a little bit too far away for the time being. And after everything we just seen, I don't think a dive bomb would be fantastic. Borgesman losing another position now to Fideli. Bearing in mind these guys have a pit window, so he can't repair the damage just yet if he wants to make just one pit stop. And Fideli then in the BMW with what looks to be a much more nicely put together car. This keeps that position on the exit of turn 1. Meanwhile, Mellis continuing to put pressure onto the Porsche up in front, and now the pit window opens. So expect a flurry of those cars to come in and repair some of that damage that they suffered during all of that chaos, because there was a lot of it. There was a lot of cars involved in all of that. It was difficult to track down who may have been responsible for each of those incidents, but the end result was absolute carnage as Korekis once again sniffing around the gearbox of Osterman just in front. He got the job done, but I think a mistake in towards turn 1 had a butterfly effect that I'm sure that he didn't even predict on that front. But our top 4 drivers all staying out for the time being. Seeing what lap times everyone did last time around. Boothby, fastest of them all. Valentine kept him honest, couple of tenths away, and does look like Valentine in that Ferrari has got some good pace. The only other man in the 34s for the time being. It was pretty even between Osterman and Korekis. And crucially, for our championship protagonists, Bischoff and Jardier. So there's a little bit lag there for Bischoff on the exit of turn 2. Bischoff extending his gap in front of Jardier there. And I think also Jardier came off worse with that damage. A lot of damage, I think, to the front left corner of that car. Meanwhile, also closing up a little bit in front of us. Who is that emerging from the pit lane? As a yellow Ferrari just up in front. I'm trying to see what the race number is of that car. It could be a car there's a lap down. Number 23, Lexus of Kogler, trying to make their way past. You see Dennis Saliver, the next car on track, and the yellow Ferrari does get out of the way, and Kogler moves up a position then. Not sure who that was for. I think it is Manson that is a lap down there. Also got Jonas Bowman that has just come out of the pits, I believe, although there was chaos further up the order. Where is Joris Appel? Joris Appel has lost 2 positions there, so what happened to the Audi? Oh, it was a big mistake through. Oh, and there was contact on the exit between himself and Vassner there, but a huge oversteer moment. I think that was all entirely by himself, but that's allowed Walsingham through and Vassner. And Walsingham gets himself into the top 10. He's been hunting around that area for a while. He's got Karppinen for company as well. Will the BMW have the legs to try to make a move down towards turn 1? Pretty even between those 2 cars for the time being, it looks like. Does he think about a late dive? No, he doesn't, and the Audi will maintain position for the time being. Other cars starting to make their pit stops. Very few, though, from our top 10. By the looks of it, have decided to go for that. They're obviously trying to stretch out that sit, maybe worried about the tyre where the times have dropped by about 5 to 6 tenths of a second from the start of this race on average for everybody, so there is quite a severe drop off. I don't want to go too early onto the next set of tyres, but the undercut could be quite powerful potentially as Karppinen goes a little bit wide on the exit of turn 7. We've got Tringali trying to put some pressure onto Anderson as well, as a lot of our drivers emerging from the pits. I do believe at the moment Korekis has got close up to the back of Osterman further up, but unable to get in close enough proximity. This is a position he found himself in before, and he made those positions up by capitalising on the battle between Valentine and Osterman. But it looks like Valentine now is into P2. Will not be looking back and does seem to be trying to check out there. I see lap times last time around did lose a little bit actually to the McLaren behind, so not over and said and done with just yet. But Korekis just doesn't quite seem to have the pace advantage to get a move done on track. Maybe he'll be one that plays the strategy. It was strategy calls that allowed him to get past Boothby in the end for P2 at Silverstone. Went for the overcut and went for the undercut, and then George Boothby, when he came out of the pits, had a McLaren that was raging up behind him and went around the outside in towards Maggotts and Beckett. It was absolutely fantastic move, probably my move of the race. And that saw Korekis take that P2 spot. George Boothby did try to fight back, but he didn't quite have the pace in the end, but in comparison to today, almost 14 seconds clear of the rest of the field. He is loving life in that pink Ferrari in front, and he is continuing to be the only driver to be in the 34s. That is absolutely man and virtual machine, at least, in harmony right now. And that number 9 car continuing to extend their advantage and maybe head towards a 3rd victory of the season. And with all the other chaos that has played out today for some of the drivers ahead of him in the championship, that will certainly be very profitable for him. Valentine, if he can maintain this P2 spot, that will certainly help him out as well. As the likes of Hugo Merles has just emerged out of the pits as well, so that's our front runner for stoppers as Karppinen has come in, but a lot of our other drivers staying out for the time being. There's a temporary white flag comes out for Korekis. I think that's the leaderboard just being a little bit overly sensitive. But these drivers continuing to stay out for the time being. Osterman started to regain a little bit of pace. It was pretty even between Korekis and Valentine, but Osterman last time around did look to be the quicker of those, or of that trio. see if he can regain those spots. Got very, very tight on the exit. You have to be so careful not to push it just a little bit too hard. I think those Ferraris behind, I think, is that actually Hugo Merles in that group? No, it's not. It's must be one of the other Ferraris further down the order. I know that the pit stop around here does sometimes tend to bring you out around kind of a lap down or so from where you pitted from, but not quite. That is obviously one of the Ferraris further down the order. It can be a very weird scenario when the people you're racing with, you've done your pit stop, so you're technically not racing them at that point. But then when they do their pit stops, then they will re-emerge, and then you'll be back to racing as both McLarens head towards the pit lane now, and both trying to maybe get an undercut onto Valentine in that Ferrari. I think George Boothby has the freedom for any strategy. Korekis very, very late on the brakes there on the entry to the pit lane. He might gain a bit of time on Osterman. We'll have to see whether or not that ends up converting into an advantage. Meanwhile, Jardier over the last few laps has slowly but surely been reeling in the Porsche of Marco Bischoff, and they could be crucial positions. We've also got Brun that is... it was these Ferraris that were behind that group. So Brun and Tringali fairly close to one another on circuit at the moment, but I don't think anything will change between them. I do want to keep an eye on Korekis and Osterman though, because it did seem like Korekis gained some time. Meanwhile, someone else is finding time at the end of this stint. Maybe the BMW managing his tyres a bit better despite some of the damage, although you can see visibly beaten up on the front bumper of the Porsche. Marco Bischoff might be struggling a little bit as it is side by side, I think, or almost not quite, between Osterman and Korekis. Osterman will lead them out of the pit lane and I think will maintain his advantage. But if they do fight on the exit, that could help the likes of Valentine. Does Korekis try to react on the pit exit and make something happen in towards turn one? Long pit straight. Just want to keep an eye on these two though, our championship protagonists. Doesn't look like Jardier able to do anything for the time being, and Korekis unable to do anything as they come out of the pit lane, as Marco Bischoff then into the pits, championship leader. It's been an interesting race from his point of view so far, but Jardier stays out then, as does George Boothby. So he feels he's got good pace in that car at the moment, trying to maybe set himself up for a strong finish to this race and go for the overcut strategy. It does seem like the tyres may be falling off for some of those mid-engine cars, and Jardier continuing to maintain pace, although he's got the Mercedes of McCall just behind for company, and it's quite possible that Mercedes right now is the faster of those two cars. They're not battling for position, of course, but it can be a very frustrating situation if you are a backmarker but you feel that you're being held up by the car ahead. And you can see that's George Boothby that is just in the background of these two. So if these two start to fight, that might be the heads up for George to head into the pits as to not lose any time. Although with the sort of lead he has right now, Korekis sends it down to the inside. Massive overshoot in towards turn 12 there, and goes into the sand pit then. And that's Osterman going to come flying past. And George Boothby not too far behind, so a couple of mistakes then under braking now for Korekis, and I think his day is going to get worse because George Boothby then, who is staying out and extending his stint, is going trying to make his way past, and I think Korekis is going to concede. That's very unfortunate there for him, but went flying down the inside. Thankfully did not collect Osterman in the process, but clearly not what he was aiming to do. A few more of our drivers have pitted. Also just quickly see, Marco Bischoff has come out in front of Hugo Merles and Lewis Rotas, so he has maintained that advantage. Jardier and Del Fanta now into the pits, so we'll have to see where Jardier emerges in all of that. Closest battle on track for the time being though is Arnaud Brun versus Vassner in the Audi just up ahead. The Ferrari looking very racy down that short flat out section there. Difficult to make a move into turn 6 though. A corner that you have to be really patient with as you go around there. Also, it may not be entirely representative, but right now there is a Lexus in P3 in a top split race. So Dominic Kogler in the 23 car A valiant effort there for him to even take the Lexus in this championship, and currently finds himself on the podium. I'm sure he'd be hoping for a red flag at this point in time, but meanwhile, Jardier coming out of the pits, and whereabouts is Bischoff in all of this? So he is coming through turn 13 now, and Jardier, how much more? He's still got a decent chunk of the pit lane left to go. Marco Bischoff on his way down the start-finish straight. Will we see that BMW appear in front or behind him? Championship rivals, of course. As we head down towards the exit barrier, you see the white BMW on the right then. Is Marco going to maintain the advantage? He doesn't! So Jardier does get in front. So the overcut then has worked in favour of Jardier, and he will be grinning from ear to ear for that, because not only does he have fresher tyres to the end of the stint, I'm not sure whether or not Bischoff repaired the damage, that's any damage that he had. Let's see if we can have a close look at that Porsche. Looks like I can still see some marks on the front of it, so I have a feeling you can see visibly, yeah, I think there's a few scratches. There's definitely some scratches on Hugo's car just behind, so I think that perhaps both himself and Jardier have kept their car. So maybe it was a poor pit stop for the man leading the standings, but Jardier then finds himself back in front of his championship rival and is only 5 seconds adrift of Karekis, Osterman and Valentine. But I don't know whether or not he will have enough pace in that car to close in on those guys. Meanwhile, Henrik Gamble putting some pressure onto Morgan McCall in the Mercedes, as George Boothby just emerging from the pit lane. I think he is followed out by Schwartz behind, I think, and George Boothby continues out in front, and Valentine very far away. It'll be interesting to see with the level of undercut that Valentine would have had. I think it was only a couple of laps or so. It appears he's gained maybe about half a second to a second, but nothing too significant in the end. Meanwhile, rotors all over the back of the Ferrari of Hugo, who does sit, both of those cars actually visibly showing a lot of damage, so I don't think either of those cars are working all too nicely. Walsingham has emerged out in P10, but Rotors does look to be the faster of these two, trying to see if he can snatch away P7. But Jardier then making that overcut work. George Boothby, I expect to see some absolute flying laps there from him. Valentine was able to do a lap that was almost good enough for fastest lap of the race. And previously, George Boothby's fastest lap before the pit stops was half a second clear of anyone else's. So he may even break towards the 33-second lap mark, which in race trim would be absolutely extraordinary. He's commanded this race from the front and broke the gap from himself and all the carnage that took place behind. Did then additionally benefit from some of the extra chaos that took place, but he has looked absolutely mighty so far today, both in qualifying and in the opening half of the race. Rotors losing a little bit in the last couple of sectors as Hugo regains a little bit of pace. The gap between Bischoff and Jardier, difference in lap time was 7 thousandths of a second last time around, so nothing too much. Meanwhile, Yonkers is not too far adrift from Pernanen in the BMW. Yonkers has had an eventful race as well in the Porsche. You think he might have the outright pace on the BMW ahead. Whether or not he'll have the straight line speed to do anything about the number 14 car in front of him towards turn 1, I'm not so sure, but certainly will be giving it a good go. Does he gain in the slipstream? Maybe if he was a bit closer. I think he's going to have to be quite a chunk closer than that. Meanwhile, someone is hassling the back of the car ahead. Alessio Mellis has closed up to the number 15 car of Dennis Salva. And that green Porsche, I think there might be a new livery potentially on that Porsche, one of the new ones that was added, because I'm not sure I recognise it from before. Either that or maybe it's one of the less popular ones that I haven't seen, but nice to see a different colour scheme on the Porsche. But you can see in that sector the Porsche with its changes of direction as Yonkers has... What's happened to Pernanen there? Pernanen lost a lot of time very, very quickly, so he made a mistake in turn 6. Oh, way too much speed in towards turn 6. Goes into the gravel, just about manages to pull it up, and then that gives Marco Yonkers a free position to jump up to 22nd spot. As meanwhile, last time around, interestingly, up at the front, I've got here that George Boothby's best lap of the race was a 34.6. Now, I know that you may not have been able to see that from your end, but previously it was most definitely a 34.5, but it's the 0.6 that's now registering, and Valentine last time around did a 34.1, which was extremely fast, but that's not being registered, so I can only imagine that maybe he had a cut on that lap. It is easy to do around here, so they will have to be careful not to get any drive-through penalties, but... see what George Boothby can do, maybe take an extra lap or so to get those tyres working. Vassner putting some sorts of pressure onto Tringali just ahead in the Ferrari. The Audi maybe a few weeks ago would have had the extra pace to combat this Ferrari speed around here, but right now does not seem like can do anything about that Ferrari in front. Good effort though from a lot of drivers in a lot of different manufacturers managing to extract pace. Notably, also must be said, last time around, 9/10 of a second in favour of Jardier then over Marco Bischoff. So whether or not that is still in terms of exchange of damage or if that is on pure pace alone, but that was an uncharacteristically slow lap from the number 1 car. And he's only got Hugo Merles 1.2 seconds adrift, and Rotors is giving him some company as well, so Bischoff has to be careful that this 6th place position, just 1 place behind Jardier in front, doesn't end up turning into a sudden loss of multiple positions to those cars behind, so we'll have to keep an eye on that one. Just looking further around the order, Vassner once again, close up to the back of Tringali in that Ferrari, but doesn't seem like the Audi able to do anything just yet. Closes in down the start-finish straight, but then loses in the twisty stuff. Alessio Mellis, similar story, closes in on the Ferrari of, on the Porsche of Dennis just up ahead. And then as soon as we hit this next series of corners, see that Porsche may start to fly. We know that the Porsche is good under acceleration and brakes. I imagine that turn 6 and 7 is something it particularly gets on with. Mellis trying his best to outbrake the Porsche in front. He's done a good job actually of sticking with the Porsche through this sector. Let's see what's the drive like as they head down this little short back straight. It was pretty even. You see that initial Porsche acceleration so good out of turn 7. And the advantage that Mellis gets, not good enough to challenge for the time being, but maybe it's the closest he's been through this sector for a while. And maybe we'll be able to do something as they head down the start-finish straight. He's continued to be very, very close to the Porsche in front. And even though we've obviously seen changes in BOP as of late, I think that Ferrari power, unless the aero damage is too severe, may be good enough to give Mellis an opportunity down in towards turn 1 as the pit window comes to an end. But I think everyone finished making their pit stops a good few laps ago. Can Mellis this time around do anything about the Porsche in front? He is getting a much better slipstream down this start-finish straight, closing all the time. Dennis does have to go towards the inside. Mellis trying to go to the outside, then it's going very, very close on the entry to the braking zone. Can the Ferrari sweep all the way around? Oh, there was a little bit of shoulder rubbing on the entry to the corner, and the Ferrari sent out wide on the exit, and now has the Lexus for company, flashing of the lights from the Ferrari of Mellis there. Kogler though hunting just behind the Ferrari. We don't get to see this car very often. I do just want to hop on board this because it does make a rather beautiful sound. think there is anything quite as thunderous as the Lexus, and I'm not 100% certain about what engine is in that car. I can't remember if it has a little bit of NASCAR heritage behind it, which would be wildly appropriate for the circuit that they are at. Meanwhile, Tringali under pressure now from the Audi of, excuse me, other way around, it's Appel that's under pressure from Tringali. That was why there was nothing on the rear diffuser of the Ferrari, but Appel able to hold him back for the time being. That Audi good enough straight line speed, as Rotors also further up has managed to close in to Hugo a little bit. That gives a bit of space for Bischoff to have a breather. Jardier lapping in the 34s at the moment, so pretty competitive pace from himself, as George Boothby did improve up to a 34.2 as the fastest lap of the race. Not quite as fast as Valentine's .1, but I do think that included a cut, hence why it wasn't an official fastest lap. But then these last few laps has been a couple of tenths clear of Valentine and has a big advantage over the Frenchman right now in this race. Tringali continuing to put pressure onto Joris Appel. He was close last time around, been bringing Sasha Vassner with him over these last couple of laps, and if these two start to battle maybe a bit more intensely, then could have a three-way fight for P11. Kogler also getting close up to the back of Mellis further down the order. I think really needs to get firmly locked into position though onto one of the straight sections of the circuit if you want to hope of making that move though. On board the front splitter of Tringali, Appel moving towards the inside line quite early on, but you can see the grunt of Audi even with the slipstream. The Ferrari unable to do anything, has a look up the inside but just cannot close in as much as he would like. It's all pretty even once again at the top. Everyone's setting very similar lap times. 3 tenths clear though for George Boothby, who looks to extend that advantage once more. Good line there for Oscar through turn 4 and 5. We saw Mellis get very, very close, and it's obviously a Ferrari trait going in towards turn 6, gets very close on the entry to the braking zone. Vassner definitely now tied into this battle. Ferrari all running it all the way to the outside. Vassner goes a little bit further along, and Tringali now finds himself in a position to potentially attack, but again, just a little bit too far away, and he's got to keep an eye on the Audi of Vassner, who is filling up his rear view mirrors with those 4 rings on the front bumper. And the Ferrari got a little bit compromised through the S's now. That may give an opportunity to Vassner, because the Audis clearly aren't quite good in a straight line around here. We know they've taken a bit of a hit on the power deficit, and that's a wide moment for Tringali, and he may have lost the chance to fight for P12. Because right now, I think Vassner could well be in a position to try to close up to the Ferrari, because Tringali not going to have the greatest tow from Appel just in front. Does Vassner have anything in the tank? It's looking speedy down the start-finish straight. Does he go towards the inside? Tringali does defend the inside. He's going to send Vassner all the way to the outside, who goes very, very late on the brakes. And I think it's a little bit too late, it is. But valiant effort there. Maybe just misjudged the overspeed going down in towards that first corner. But he does, in the end, get the car stopped. But that gap clearly opening up again, as has some of the other gaps, as it's Mellis once again locked onto the back of Dennis in that green Porsche. Lexus of Kogler, I think, getting involved in this battle from time to time when these guys start to scrap. Allows him to reel them in that mighty V8 powered Lexus. Obviously used to be a car in very much older versions of ACC, was extremely competitive in the wet. In fact, he was untouchable in the wet, and then went through a couple of phases where it was pretty good due to just outright grunt. I think it fared fairly well at Paul Ricard, if I remember rightly. Had a huge amount of straight line speed there, but in more recent times, with the way that BOP changes have played out, tyre models, suspension physics, all of that, I think that car has, for the most part, seen its day. But Dominic Kogler giving it a good go at representing the Lexus in the number 23 car. As always, getting very busy at the tail end of the top 10, as Rotors has dropped away now from Hugo Merles and has got Del Fanta and Walsingham for company. So we've got a potential three-way fight for the outside top 10, or the latter portions of the top 10 positions. Maybe a three-way fight for P8 as Walsingham looking very racy on the back of Del Fanta's gearbox. And lead Audi gets very, very wide on the exit. Does that give an opportunity to Walsingham heading down in towards turn 8? I'm not sure. Can't do anything about it just yet. And Walsingham then will have to relinquish for the time being. But may have another opportunity if he sets himself up well through the banking section and carry that slipstream all the way down towards turn 1. If you want a perfect view of what a slingshot through a curve banking and down a start-finish straight can do. So you saw Verstappen do it to Hamilton at Zandvoort the other day. Clearly a very different part of the world and a very different circuit, but those couple of corners have quite a lot in common with what we have here at the final turn of Indianapolis. But I think Walsingham may be a little bit too far away, and that Audi of Del Fanta, in fact, now is the one that is looking to close up ahead towards Rotors, but unable to do so for the time being. Walsingham all very, very late on the brakes and makes contact on the entry in turn 1 as we get a slap in the face from the McLaren behind. We'll take a bit of a rewind there and see what that was on the outside perspective. Just a complete misjudgment from Walsingham. Thankfully, Del Fanta keeps it pointing the right way, but yeah, we've got a face full of McLaren there, so if you're interested in what the front splitter on that car looks like, well, now you know. As meanwhile, Yonkers putting pressure onto Dominic Kogler. Yonkers much faster than these drivers ahead over the last few laps. That Lexus, though, could be difficult to pass down these back straights. I'm sure Dominic will make it very, very wide, but let's see how much does the Porsche gain in this sequence of corners. You'd have to imagine it's going to be a good chunk as Kogler goes wide through turn 4, then through the kink of 5. This is where it's an area of the track where the Porsche is going to be very, very quick. In particular, Kogler goes wide on the entry towards turn 5. That might be all the invitation that Marco Yonkers needs, and he sweeps around the outside into turn 7 and makes his way up. He has maybe got the Lexus, though, for company down this back straight. Can Kogler fight back? And I think he's going to back out of that one in the end. So Marco Yonkers makes his way up into 21st position and sets his sights on those other cars up ahead. We've got just over 10 minutes of this race left to go. Meanwhile, Tringali, closest he has been in a while, as Walsingham also got very, very close to the back of Del Fanta, but I don't think he was able to make his way past. Can Tringali do anything down in towards turn 1? Joris Appel in the Audi once again has enough of an advantage. Oscar keeps the nose towards the inside, but just not able to get alongside enough to compete with that Audi, and instead will have to maintain position for the time being. We can see very nicely settled through turns 4 and then 5. We saw some spontaneous dives in the Ferrari from Valentine early on. Whether we will see something from Tringali, I'm not too sure. It's getting close for that battle further down the order for 20th position as well, I think. Or P19 actually. Tringali, though, sniffing around the back of Joris Appel, unable to find a way through. Vassner has been involved in this battle from time to time as well, but just can't seem to find a way through. Very even on pace, and a couple of trade-offs in terms of straight line grunt and cornering performance. And Oscar does seem to have a car that is better suited to these fast sweeping corners, but the Audi's doing just enough out at the moment, as McCall, not too far behind, goes down the inside of Arnaud Brun, who I think got his braking all sorts of wrong on the entry there, as that was a very peculiar overtake actually. I think McCall wasn't quite expecting the door to open up in the way it did. I think Brun almost looked like he let the Mercedes through there. I'm 100% certain he did, but did look very awkward, but that certainly gave Morgan a position there. Mellis still stuck behind that green Porsche of Salva in P19 as Walsingham getting close up to the gearbox of Del Fanta once more. They've fallen away from Lewis Roters, who's dropped back from Merles just in front. Bischoff has been taking a little bit of time out of Jardier, but maybe not quite enough going into the final stages of this race. That overcut working nicely, it seems, for the BMW. And it won't be a huge amount of points regained in the championship, but Jardier, I think particularly with how chaotic this race was at times, will be taking, I think, anything that he can get. Walsingham still hassling the back of the Audi. Just can't seem to find a way through for the time being. Yonkers, meanwhile, has closed up to the back of Mellis, and that's allowed the Porsche of Dennis Salva to get away. Porsche versus Ferrari then down this back straight. Can Yonkers do anything about it? Does he think about a late send towards the inside of turn 8? Oh, it's a wide moment for Mellis. See, that's an awkward line for Yonkers there. Porsche does well to recover it and gets nicely tucked in to the inside of turn 11. Might have an opportunity potentially on the brakes towards turn 12. Not quite. How much straight line speed will he be able to gain in the slipstream? The Ferrari's fallen away from the Porsche now, so we'll be losing out a little bit. Can Mellis defend from the rapid pace of Marco Yonkers? As I do need to check actually between Tringali. It's getting very, very busy between these two, and Joris Appel has lost 2 positions, and Tringali and Vassner make their way through into 11th and 12th position. And Vassner now trying to sneak up the inside of Tringali, who's gone wide through turn 6. That's going to be the outside for turn 7. Vassner's been waiting for an opportunity, as he then hangs it wide there. Joris Appel trying to get back involved in this one as they head down towards the back straight, as Joris Appel fighting back down the inside. Vassner gives him space, just about enough. That does force him, though, to come away from the back of the Ferrari in front. Yonkers still behind Mellis further down the order, and Walsingham still behind the Audi of Del Fanta. But Joris Appel made a mistake somewhere in all of that then, I think, and lost 2 positions in just a handful of corners. Meanwhile, looking back then with Yonkers through turn 8. This is where the Porsche will be quick, I think, and that's a bit of a wonky line for Mellis there. Does look like good drive on the exit from the Porsche, but just the Ferrari does seem rather mighty around here and gets up to speed quickly as well. Also, a lot of drivers, I think, in more recent times using very, very high TC values in the Ferrari. Works very nicely at preserving the tyres and gives you a very smooth exit and doesn't drop you a lot of pace at the same time. A lot of drivers then finding that sort of advantage now. Makes it a nicer car to drive as well, because when the Evo version of the Ferrari came in, it ended up being a bit of a tricky one to tame at times, because there was a sort of snap on the higher engine maps of when the power kicked in. But I think with those higher TC settings, a little bit like the Aston with the TC2 values, it makes it a bit more manageable. Meanwhile, Vassner all over the gearbox once more. Tringali looks to the inside, looks towards the outside, back to the outside, and tries to keep a nose in for turn 11. I don't think, turn 9, excuse me. I don't think he can make that one stick, though. The Ferrari holds on to it for the time being. Yonkers got very, very close for a moment onto the back of Mellis, but nothing changing there. Walsingham still continuing to keep the Audi in front of Del Fanta honest. And that would look like quite a compromised run, actually, for Del Fanta. So this may be Walsingham's best opportunity yet. Gaining ever so slightly in the slipstream. Del Fanta staying towards the inside line. Walsingham misjudges braking before. Does he spot it right this time round? Trying to go all the way around the outside in towards turn 1. He's kept his car there. He's going to be alongside in towards turn 2. Be brilliant moving, make it stick. A little bit of bumping on the exit of turn 2. Del Fanta to the grass. Not sure he'll be fantastically pleased about that one, but he's back up the inside for turn 4. and then as they wrap around, almost making contact on the exit, but Del Fanta has to settle for P10 then, and the McLaren finally gets in front as Del Fanta flashing the lights, not happy about that contact on the exit of turn 2 there, but the McLaren, very, very brave move around the outside. Will he be under pressure though towards turn 8? Can Del Fanta fight back? I don't think he can. I think that is too much of a gap now. The Audi did have a little bit of a look at trying to fight back earlier in the lap, but it does look like now maybe that McLaren, the Walsingham being unleashed, may be able to move up the road. Only a couple of laps left to go, so I don't expect... Oh, that's Yonkers trying to go the inside of Mellis towards turn 5. That's going to turn into the outside of turn 6. The Porsche might be the one car that can make that one work, but the Ferrari holds strong on that inside line. That's allowing Kogler to join this battle once more in the mighty Lexus. Mellis, though, holding strong for the time being from Yonkers, who definitely has the pace in that car, but it almost feels a little bit reminiscent. It goes a bit deep under brakes there. It feels like Porsche of old. Fantastic agility and speed in some of these corners, but just no straight line speed to fight some of those other cars around, as Igor Krishnic in the BMW is close up to the back of Jonathan Clifford in a battle for 24th position. So it's getting a bit close between those two, as it is for Lewis Roters that has closed in over the last couple of laps onto Hugo Merlet. So that gap was over a second at one point, but Roters is managing to give Hugo a tough time, although Hugo nice lines there through the opening series of corners and re-extends that advantage. Walsingham already gapping Del Fanta behind, so he's trying to get involved in this one very, very late. Kogler close to the back of Yonkers, but I imagine that that will potentially open up fairly shortly again as they make their way through the opening series of corners. I don't think the Lexus has quite got the speed. He's doing a good job of chucking that car around in the way that he is. As Eagle now trying to go to the outside of the Lamborghini. That Lamborghini mighty in a straight line now since those updates. And Clifford does keep it on the black stuff. They've got Jonas just behind for company in the 24 McLaren. So he's trying to get involved in this one potentially, as well as Rotors on the back. And that's a huge run as they head down towards turn 1. The McLaren has been reeling in the Ferrari of Hugo, and Hugo massively backs off there toward turn 1, or in actual fact it was a mistake from Rotors and then a follow-up from Hugo. So this is very back and forth concertina. Walsingham now does find himself in a potential opportunity, already trying to go down the inside of Hugo Merles, who seems to have a horrid time in that Ferrari. Almost loses the back end on the entry towards turn 4. They're losing tons of time on that last lap. I can't imagine he's clipped the wall anywhere. It's quite difficult to hit a wall unless he did it on the banking, potentially down the back straight, but huge. That gap is extending massively, very, very quickly. And one that's also snuck down over the last few laps is Korekis, closing onto the back of Osterman, who's gone very, very wide. And that could give an opportunity to Korekis, see if he can make his way onto the podium. Meanwhile, Del Fanta, I think, went very, very deep actually into the corner. George Boothby's just started the final lap of the race, but Korekis now, after being a second or so behind Osterman just in front, suddenly a couple of cars massively losing time in these closing stages of the race, and Korekis now maybe his last opportunity to try to get past Osterman. It's identical cars down this back straight, and looks like Osterman good straight line speed in that McLaren. Korekis looks up the inside, backs out of it though for the time being, and won't be able to make anything stick. Del Fanta keeps on chopping and changing the gap between himself and Hugo Merles as well. I'm not sure if he'll be able to get past. He's trying to as they head down towards turn 1. And I think, yeah, Hugo Merles must have clipped the wall somewhere, because he is just fighting with nothing, it seems, at the moment. But Del Fanta then makes his way up in towards P9. Korekis still hassling the back as Morgan McCall comes into the pit. So unless it's fuel issues, of course, for some of these drivers, I'm not 100% certain as George Boothby just has a couple of corners to go. Korekas almost saw him out that down the inside towards turn 8, and that might be everything that Korekas can do, because he did get the braking wrong a little bit. But here it is then, George Boothby absolutely dominated this race from start to finish. He led every single lap, and the pink Ferrari, he becomes the first man to be a 3-time winner here in the LFM Pro Series, and he did what he set out to do. He told us he was going to aim for the win this week, and he brings home the victory in the number 9 Ferrari. Fantastic stuff there from him. Valentine Barrier, strong pace, wasn't quite able to match the likes of George Boothby, but he'll be pleased with that one, I think, and he will finish P2. Osterman does hold on to P3. Korekas settles for P4. Charlie 8, crucial points perhaps over his championship rival of Bischoff, as they will finish 5th and 6th respectively. Lewis Roters are going to have a drag race with Walsingham all the way to the line. Walsingham does the inside. Roters tries to block him. Who's going to get it? It's going to be very, very close between the pair of them. I think Roters maybe has just about maintained that one, and he has, by the absolute smallest of margins. Walsingham gave it everything that he possibly had at the end there, but unable to get the position. Del Fanta drops to gains P9 over Hugo Merles, who seemed to have a very sad end to the race there. I wonder if that was a fuel issue. Anderson takes P11, Tringali takes P12, Vassner in P13, Joris Appel P14, Arnaud Brunt P15, then Henrik Gamble already retired to the pits, P16, Fideli in P17, as we then rejoin with some other drivers. Oh, Suzak going very, very wide. That was Mellis, almost went straight into the banking at the end there. Does hold on to his position ahead of the likes of Yonkers and Kogler, who gains 10 positions in this race overall in that Lexus, but will finish 21st in the end. Penninent, difficult day for him. Also had some contact further up the order, but that will be it then for this one. What an absolutely fantastic race. So much chaos amongst that one. But in the end, George Boothby doing everything that he needed to do to bring home a fantastic victory there for another race win this season. So excellent stuff from the number 9 car. And we'll see, hopefully, if we can get him and some other drivers into interviews, as we'll also wait for the results to officially come through in just a moment, so we can bring those up. There we go. So official results from this round then. George Boothby takes first place and bags himself a very nice 740 points from that one. Valentine claims that P2 spot, 676 for him, and Jacob Osterman, good round from him to take P3 in that one. Let's see if we have anyone that will join us for an interview this evening. I'll keep an eye on that room, but one absolutely exceptional bit of racing that we had from so many of our drivers. So much chaos at one point in the race, it just didn't seem to matter where you looked. There was just cars battling left, right and centre, some making a bit more contact at times than they would have liked, I imagine, but thankfully all managing to at least make it fairly well to the end. I think we had maybe 1 or 2 retirements, which, considering the amount of action and battling that we had, I think was pretty good going. But George Boothby, what an absolutely dominant performance from him. It'd be nice if we could get him in for an interview, although I imagine he wouldn't have a great deal to tell us, because clearly he was off in his own world. I think about the most amount of action he had was lap 1, trying to keep Valentine from taking the lead from him around the outside at turn 1, drove off into the sunset for the opening few laps, and then got a little bit busy when the pit stops kicked in and saw other drivers battling around him, but was really able to just control his pace, keep consistent, and do everything that he needed to do in that one. just looking ahead into next week, we will be heading to Monza. So the same place that Formula 1 is heading to this weekend will play host to round 11 and the penultimate round of the championship. Speaking of which, let's see if the standings have updated. So I think championship standings will take a little bit more time to come through, but if we do some quick calculations looking at our main protagonist to see how that gap will have changed between Jardier and Marco Bischoff after clearly not an ideal race from there. Samir retired from that race as well. I'm not sure. It got very busy at one point. I saw a black Ferrari go around. I'm not sure about Samir in that instance. It may well have been because Hugo Moles did continue in the end, but definitely had some damage on that car. So Jardier will leave here with only an extra 36 points over Marco Bischoff, which, when you consider that the gap is over 1,000, is not quite the margin I imagine that Jardier would have been hoping. But there are still a couple of rounds to go, and all it takes is for potentially one disaster race for Marco to maybe upset how things are looking and cause himself some grief going into the final round. And who knows, Monza, not typically a circuit that has favoured the Porsches very well in the past. I imagine they'll be a bit stronger than they have been before, but you would have to imagine that given the previous performances of that car, even with some of the power changes, it may be difficult for Marco to compete with the likes of the Ferraris, maybe even the McLarens, and we'll have to see about the BMWs. I think it will be a car that performs well in the corners. Whether or not it'll have the outright grunt to compete at the front, maybe the Audis will be strong there as well. Again, we'll have to see. Could be a very interesting one. It doesn't look like, sadly, we're going to have any interviews for tonight. So in which case, I think that is going to be it then. So after an absolutely epic round, as always, in the LFM Pro Series, George Bushby then takes his third win of the season and becomes so far the most winningest driver in the series. So huge congratulations to him on completing what he set out to do when he joined us in the interview room last week. Monza will be a week from now then, same time, same place here on the channel. If you did enjoy the stream tonight, then do feel free to leave a like and possibly even subscribe to the channel as well. It does all help and keeps you in tune in for the action for future streams as well. And if you want to get involved in some of this yourself, then do head over to lowfuelmotorsport.com. Get yourself a license together on the LFM site. Go through the ranks and sooner rather than later may even find yourself competing with some of these guys at the very top of the game and battling against the very best on ACC. So if that sounds like a good plan to you, then do head over to the website. Links are in the description. But I think then that is going to be it for this week. So thank you everybody so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that stream and all of the chaos and carnage that we had in that. Apologies for a couple of the little technical issues on my side. Hopefully they will be ironed out for next week. And hopefully we'll see as many of you there as possible. So thank you everybody for watching. But until next time then, it is goodbye.